Well, today I'm going to do a prophecy update. I'm going to call this one Attacking the Foundations. I'm actually at a conference in Oklahoma City put on by Prophecy Watchers, the Blessed Hope Prophecy Forum. It's been an interesting week. Good to catch up with a lot of my friends that speak at various conferences on Bible prophecy. One of the main themes that we've talked about here, or that people have talked about, is the convergence of events, the things that I talk about each week. So let's start off with a passage. I think you'll understand where I'm coming from when I say that there is an attack on the foundations. 2 Timothy chapter 3 says this, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good." Verse 4, "Traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away, for of this sort are they which creep into houses, and lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away with divers lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth." Or keep these verses in mind as I talk about things this week, as you can see that there's an attack on the foundations. God knows the end from the beginning. And one of the things that you need to do if you want to know the end, you need to go back to the beginning. You need to go back to Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, and see the foundations that God has laid and how things are happening in our world today to attack those foundations. And I think it will help you understand how the whole prophetic picture is unfolding. I thought this was a good graphic to represent the attack, I believe the attack on the Constitution that occurred during the Kavanaugh hearings. Again, I'm not sure Kavanaugh is going to be the greatest justice ever, but it's more about the principle of the thing and how things were done that concern me. There's a good article in yesterday's Wall Street Journal about Heather McDonald titled "The Scourge of Diversity." Heather is a conservative. She used to be very liberal when she was in college. She does some great writing for the Manhattan Institute. One of the things that she is concerned about is this focus on diversity and how it's undermining knowledge and how the university functions. And you can see that attack on knowledge, I think, by this short little clip. I apologize in advance. It is Hillary Clinton, but just a short clip of her being interviewed by Christian Amanpour on CNN the other day.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. That's why I believe if we are fortunate enough to win back the House and/or the Senate, that's when civility can start again. But until then, the only thing that the Republicans seem to recognize and respect is strength.
I guess that shows where things are going to go. Here is a clip of a street in Portland, Oregon, where Antifa protesters took over and started directing traffic. And you can see this gentleman, they chased down the street. I've turned the sound down for the most part because there's a lot of bad language as they're yelling at this gentleman who turned and went down the street and that sort of thing. You can see them pounding on his car. You'll see this one guy come up here with a billy club and he'll actually hit the car, and then the gentleman will drive off and they're trying to get his license plate and that sort of thing. So it looks to me like this person was under attack. This was on Twitter. It was put up by a gentleman who had a Twitter account. The Twitter account no longer exists. I think Twitter suspended it. I'm not sure, but I went to his page today and it was gone. But I was able to capture the video the other day. But the Gateway Pundit has an article that says that Portland police want to charge the driver with crimes after escaping the mob protest. And they consider the protesters to be the victims of this gentleman. They want to charge him with assault. Now, I want you to focus on this particular clip of this guy coming up and hitting his car with a billy club as the guy tries to get away, and the police want to charge him. I think it shows you how far things have gone in our culture. If you think back a few months, I think this article is from back in May, there was a gentleman who was associated with ISIS who went into a supermarket in France and took a number of people hostage. A French policeman stepped forward and said that he would go into the store in place of one of the hostages if the hostages was released. The hostage was released, and the gunman later killed the policeman and 3 other people. What someone proposed to do was to name the place, the area, after the dead police officer in honor of his heroic sacrifice. That is not going to happen. The Voice of Europe reports this. French hero who sacrificed himself to save a hostage from an Islamist won't have a place named after him as it may offend Muslims. This is actually a quote from the article. When they had the meeting to do this, this is what the people wanting the place named after the police officer were told. This place wasn't prestigious enough before telling the truth in these terms. We are on the field. We witnessed that the population has changed, and if we give the name of Arnaud Beltrame in this district, the population will take that as a provocation. Again, I think it shows you the way the foundations are being attacked, that honoring this police officer for his heroic act, actually an act of sacrifice so this lady could live, stepping into her place, if that is honored, it would be viewed as a provocation for a large part of the community, a certain community in France. That's very troubling. Now, Christian Amanpour also interviewed the foreign minister of Hungary about Hungary's policy about not allowing immigration. And I think you'll see where she's coming from, and you'll see where he's coming from, and you can see that there's this enormous gulf between the 2 different views. Listen to this.
The main aim is to preserve, quote, Christian Hungary. And you've said, we don't accept that multiculturalism is a value by itself. Less than 2% of Hungarians were born outside the country. It's weird, that kind of language. It's very out of step with
it's honest.
The world. It's honest, okay.
It's honest.
It's honest from your perspective.
Yeah.
But what are you saying? That anything other than white Christians into your country are not accepted?
No one said that.
Excuse me. Your Prime Minister did say it. A Christian Hungary. Preserve a Christian Hungary.
Yeah, because we have been a Christian country for a millennium. And I don't really understand why is it bad news that we don't want to change that. And I don't understand why is it bad or why is it unacceptable that we would like to stick to our history, to our culture, to our heritage, to our religion. And you know, in this case, I can tell you that we never judged other countries which had different kind of policies. We never judged countries who said that multiculturalism is more valuable than a homogeneous society, for example. But please, let's leave it to the certain countries. Let's leave it to us to make a decision whether we think multiculturalism is more valuable than a homogeneous society. I understand we don't agree on that, but I respect that you have a different position, and I'm not going to judge you on that. I'll find you a very sympathetic person independently from this. So I will never judge you, but I expect the same, that we think this way. And please, let's leave it to a sovereign decision of a nation, how it would like to continue its life in its own country. So yes, we think that a country sticking to its heritage, its culture, its religion, is as valuable as another one which thinks that multiculturalism is better than that.
I fully understand what your Prime Minister and your government thinks. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it and the underlying facts. You claim to have an immigration problem, or you don't want these invaders. Sorry, let's put it a different way. You don't want these invaders.
Illegal migrants we don't want, yeah, sure.
Your Prime Minister called them invaders.
Yeah, okay, I agree.
Yet, you don't actually have an immigration problem. You don't have an asylum problem. You have a population of 10 million or so with less than 4,000 refugees or people seeking to migrate, and some of those seeking asylum. You don't actually have a numbers problem.
Well, you can see the difference of opinion. So you can see what happens in France, where a policeman is killed by an Islamic terrorist, and then Christian Amanpour interviewing the foreign minister of Hungary and ask him, well, why don't you want people that would immigrate from these countries. And she acts, frankly, very condescending to him in the way he's talking. Let's go to the University of Michigan. There was a presentation by Emory Douglas. Emory Douglas was is an artist. He is a radical from San Francisco. He, for many years, was in the leadership of the Black Panther Party. He spoke at a seminar that was required, that students at the University of Michigan, freshmen or sophomores, were required to attend as part of their learning about the world and culture. So it's the required thing, and he's an artist, and he was displaying part of his art. And you can see where this gentleman is coming from. He even attacked Obama. Nobel fraud is what the word says there. An attack on Obama's, some of the actions Obama took as president. This is a picture of him equating Hitler and Benjamin Netanyahu, defining genocide, the deliberate killing of a large group of people, especially those of a particular ethnic group or nation. You can see that he supports Palestinian movement, he supports BDS, and thinks that's a good thing. So this is what is required attendance at the University of Michigan, and I'm sure at many other universities. One of the other things that happened this week, of course, was this Hurricane Michael. First of all, there's two headlines in Thursday's Wall Street Journal. Tech routes send stocks tumbling. There are some economic tremors that are taking place. I suppose you would say that what's going on in the economy right now, in some respects, would be a Category 0 hurricane. But if you look at what happened with Michael was a Category 2, was a Category 3. But when it hit the Panhandle, it came ashore as one of the strongest hurricanes in Florida history. Certainly the strongest that's ever been recorded in that area. And the pictures of the damage of Michael are just absolutely horrific. Called an absolute monster of a storm. It just literally devastated the Panhandle. Here's some pictures from the local Pensacola and Tallahassee papers. Completely destroyed the infrastructure over a wide area there in Florida. It will be a long time before people go back to that area. It could be several months in some cases before the people have power restored. It just literally tore the power grid completely apart. Here's a boat storage facility that was hit. Here's a drone footage of Mexico Beach and some of the damage that occurred. By the way, just my little sidebar note, I've looked at a lot of aerial coverage of the hurricane and its damage, and the amateur drone footage is much better than news agencies with their big expensive helicopters. So my recommendation would be for the news agencies to go get some drones and teach people how to fly them. They're a lot cheaper and safer than helicopters, and you'll get much better footage that people can see. And the extent of the damage is just unbelievable. You'll see here in a moment the drone will take a turn as it gets towards the end of this canal, and you will see just the sheer devastation that took place there in Mexico Beach. Homes ripped off of their foundations, all of the infrastructure completely destroyed. Here's the turn, and now you'll be able to look up the beach towards the east, and you'll be able to see where the strong part of the hurricane came across the Florida Panhandle. The devastation these were all homes. These are all areas where they had homes, and you can see for certainly many miles the devastation is almost total and complete. One of the worst hurricanes in Florida history. Here's some additional pictures. Here's a still from the drone footage about what happened. Just absolutely horrific devastation. And it seems like these are building cinder blocks or building blocks, concrete blocks that used to be people's homes. Here is a headline from this morning's Absolute Monster Leaves a Splinter Path of Havoc. Here's a little chart comparing the strength of Michael compared to other storms. Really the only other storms that approached it in strength were Maria last year and Hurricane Andrew in 1992 that hits south of Miami. And then Michael came ashore with winds of 155 miles per hour. And as of the making of this chart, the other day there were 11 deaths, but that's expected to rise. But just a absolutely horrible storm. There is some good news this week in England. Christians won their gay cake battle, and there's a big article in the, I think this is from the Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph, or the Daily Mail. I'm sorry, the Daily Mail. Good article by a person. I know what bigots look like, and it's not this couple. The court said they could not bake a cake if they wanted to. And they did not have to bake a cake for a gay wedding. So at least in England, there's some good news coming out of the courts. They said it was a matter of fundamental freedom. One of the other big stories that's on the news today is the disappearance of, and I mentioned this a little bit last Sunday, the disappearance of this Saudi journalist. He was seeking a divorce, wanted his divorce to be final. There's some belief that he was told that he needed to come to the Saudi embassy in Istanbul, where he lived. There were 2 planes full of 15 men who flew into Istanbul, went to the Saudi embassy. There are pictures of him entering the embassy. There are no pictures of him leaving. And the word is that he was murdered, cut up with a bone saw, and the 2 planes left with his body. And the people, this was a hit team that came from Saudi Arabia. Now that's the allegations. That's what a lot of people are saying. There's denials from the Saudi government. But what you see in the media is very interesting. As you see this as being used as a way to attack Donald Trump, because Trump's first visit was to Saudi Arabia. Jared Kushner has gotten a close relationship with Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince. And this is, now there's a lot of things up in the air about how this is going to affect U.S.-Saudi relations. Turkey, of course, is stepping in and using it to kind of shore up its relationship with the United States. They have a very tenuous adversarial relationship with the Saudis, between the Saudis and the Turks, between Erdogan and the Saud family. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. The interesting development that came out just the other day was that when Khashoggi, the journalist, went into the Saudi embassy, he turned on his iPhone watch, and that this iPhone watch then sent a recording to a cell phone that his fiancée had while she was outside, and it recorded him, the audio of him being killed. Now, we're not sure that that's exactly the case. Now, look, Khashoggi was, for a long time, a Saudi insider. He was at odds with the Saudi family. He was a big supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. This man was no saint, but he's now, I think, because they can attack the Saudis, and by attacking the Saudis, they can attack Trump. They are using this. They're almost painting this man as a saint. It's not too dissimilar from what happened with John McCain. John McCain was not popular in the press when he ran for president in 2008, but because he was at odds with President Trump, everybody portrayed him as if he was a saint, when clearly he was not. It's also interesting if you watch in light of what just happened within the last 24 hours or so, the American pastor was freed from custody in Turkey. He had been in custody in Turkey for 2 years. The court convicted him and then said that his sentence would be time served. He was released. There was word that he was going to be in Germany for a few days, but yesterday afternoon he was in the White House with President Trump, and I'll show you a short video of that in just a moment. But it's interesting in today's papers. So here, this pastor, held for 2 years, is freed. You would think that that would be front page news. As I recall, it was front page news when the gentleman who had deserted his fellow troops in Afghanistan and actually appeared to give aid and comfort to the enemy, when he was released during the Obama administration, that was front page news. Look at how wonderful everything was. Look at how great Obama was in getting this man released. So what these newspapers did this morning was front page story in the Washington Post and the New York Times is the story about the problems with Crown Prince MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. But the story about the freeing of the American pastor, Andrew Brunson, is not there. Of course, there's these major stories about what does this mean for the Crown Prince, this alleged killing of the Saudi journalist in Istanbul. Here's a little report early last week from Debka File talking about what it might mean for the Crown Prince.
There are rumors that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman could be on the way out, as he's been missing in action the past few weeks and suddenly reappeared on Sunday during a 3-day visit to Kuwait. Prior to the visit, the Crown Prince spoke to U.S. President Trump about 4 key areas: soaring oil prices, the quarrel with Qatar, the standoff in the Yemen war, and patriots moving out of the Middle East. Sources suggest that King Salman could replace the Crown Prince with one of his brothers. This could be bad news for Trump and Netanyahu, who regard him as a close ally and a major player in their Middle East policies.
That's something that needs to bear watching because, of course, MBS has been important in the Trump peace plan. So this is front page news, big spread in the New York Times today. But the freeing of the American pastor, you can see here in the Washington Post, it was on page 14. In the LA Times, it was on page 16. And in the New York Times, it was in page 19. It acted like it was not that important. But here's just a brief clip of the meeting between Pastor Brunson and President Trump.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. This has been a long journey, but for Andrew, it's been a very interesting day because, as you probably heard, I said a little bit earlier, from a Turkish prison to the White House in 24 hours. That's not bad. Actually, and I want to start by saying that Noreen was unbelievable. She was calling and calling. She definitely loves you, let me put it that way. But she was calling and she wanted you out. And she was not playing games, right? And we're very proud of you, Noreen. Thank you very much. And you are very, very special to all of us. I won't ask you whether or not you're going back to Turkey. I won't ask that question.
We do love Turkey. We were there for 25 years and we love the Turkish people.
Great.
And
that's very nice.
We pray for their blessing.
That's very
sincere.
Nice. That's very nice. And I know you do love the Turkish people. They're great people. I know that. They're great people.
We would like to pray for you. We pray for you often.
Thank you.
As a family, my wife and I pray for you.
Thank you. Well, I need it probably more than anybody in this room. So that would be very nice. Thank you.
Could we pray for you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Noreen, what?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So you can.
Okay.
Just do it from here.
How about that? Lord God, I ask that you pour out your Holy Spirit on President Trump, that you give him supernatural wisdom to accomplish all the plans you have for this country and for him. I ask that you give him wisdom on how to lead this country into righteousness. I ask that you give him perseverance and endurance and courage to stand for truth. I ask that you protect him from slander, from enemies, from those who would undermine. I ask that you make him a great blessing to this country. Fill him with your wisdom and strength and perseverance. And we bless him. May he be a great blessing to our country. In Jesus' name, we bless you. Amen.
And I just want to pray that the Spirit of the Lord would rest on the President, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Could I ask you one question? Who did you vote for? I knew the answer. I knew the answer.
I would like to say I sent in an absentee ballot from prison.
Well, it's good to have the pastor back. Just a couple more things in today's update. UNESCO, again this week, issued a couple of resolutions, one both about what they call occupied Palestine. Number 28, the draft decision, was submitted by Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Morocco, Oman, Qatar, and Sudan. Certainly the shining lights of freedom and truth. Look at some of the things that it talks about in the the Resolution 28. The Old City of Jerusalem and its walls, a site inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List on the list of World Heritage in danger. It's a sacred city of three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It goes on to talk about the fact, point 5 that they made in their resolution. They talk about the financial crisis for UNRWA, the fact that they're going to have unable to deliver services to the Gaza Strip. They talk about the Israeli occupying authorities to cease the persistent excavations, tunneling works, and projects in East Jerusalem, particularly in and around the Old City of Jerusalem, which are illegal under international law. Now, what Israel's been doing is they've been excavating, particularly in the city of David, which is in what is today an Arab neighborhood. It's considered part of East Jerusalem. And the problem, I think, that they're upset about is that as they do these excavations, they keep finding tremendous archaeological finds. This was found, a pillar that says Jerusalem. It's from the Second Temple. It's it's about 2,000 years old. This was announced just this week. So the reason why UNESCO and others are upset is that they are finding these things that confirm the Jewish ties to Jerusalem. This is also part of the Resolution 28. It talks about this. Look at the language that they use. Now, they're talking about Hebron and Bethlehem. They're talking about the cave, the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron. They're talking about Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem. I'm sure this will be very popular at the Christ at the Checkpoint conference that I'm going to starting tomorrow. And they're called Palestinian sites. There were no Palestinians in those days. They are Arab people. Those are Jewish sites. Those have been Jewish sites for thousands of years. This is what happens. They attack the foundations. They're attacking the truth of what actually went on there in the Holy Land. This is in Resolution 28. Deplores the ongoing Israeli excavation, works and constructions of private roads for settlers, and of a wall inside the old city of Hebron. Again, Hebron is a Jewish city. It is where David reigned. It was the original, for 7 years, David reigned from there as king of Israel. It's the tribal capital of the tribe of Judah. It is not a Palestinian site. Resolution 29 also carries on with this nonsense. And again, this is just, all of this is an attack on the foundations. Look what it says in point 9. Well, first in point 8. Tangible cultural heritage entered into force as the first comprehensive law that provides Palestinian cultural heritage. This is a made-up history. They're trying to say Rachel's tomb is a Palestinian site. It's not a Palestinian site because there were no Palestinians there. There was no Palestine ever in history at that time of Rachel's tomb. It was the land of Canaan at that time. It later became the Kingdom of Israel. It was never Palestine. Point 9, and this is funded by the government of Sweden. You also see point 11, funded by the government of Norway. They're trying to erase Jewish history. This is very problematic. This is, even the New York Times noted that this is the blanket support from Israel is eroding in today's Democratic Party. So pay attention to this. You see this attack on the foundations all the time. There was another terror attack in the West, like I say, the West Bank in Judea, Samaria, at a industrial park the other day. 2 people were killed, a young mother, another individual. Prime Minister Netanyahu was in the Golan the other day and said, listen, we have to stop the Iranians. If Israel leaves the Golan, the Iranians will dip their toes in Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. There was the Russian foreign minister this week also came out and said, well, we believe what the UN says, that the Golan is really part of Syria and should be given back to Syria. I don't see this happening, but I know that this is what's going to be the big push, maybe part of what draws people in the Ezekiel 38 and 39 scenario. One more thing that I'll talk about, and then we'll be done. The Institute for National Security Studies, which is a think tank in Tel Aviv, issued a report this week about how we could go about a 2-state solution. Now, Caroline Glick has an article about it, and she notes that, look, she says, this has been done over and over again. She lamented the resignation of Nikki Haley. She appreciated how Nikki Haley stood strong for Israel at the UN, how she stood against some of these ridiculous UN organizations that exist. And Caroline notes in this that her title of her article is Standing Up to the Elitist Mobs. It's her Friday column in the Jerusalem Post. And she says, look, these elites, they've always been telling us we've got to negotiate with the Palestinian Authority. We have to negotiate with Hamas. We have to create a state in Gaza. We have to create a state in Judea and Samaria. And these are pictures of a recent military parade in Gaza. And you can see that these the partners for peace that the elites say are partners for peace. They're clearly not. So Caroline goes on. This was the INSS report. You can find this at their website. Just type in INSS, Strategic Multi-Track Framework. And this is their... They talk about the things, the demographic threat, the establishment of facts on the grounds, that these are all problems that are obstacles to the implementation of peace. They talk about all the different alternatives. One state, not democratic, not Jewish, application of Israeli law, continuation of the status quo. They have a long part here about how people can go through the different scenarios. All of them, you'll see that this is like a regional track that might work. Then there's this a state within provisional borders. And of course, that's a car wreck. Then there's also the unilateral disengagement. That's also a car wreck. This is a think tank made up of generals and that type of thing. And Caroline knows, look, she goes, this is what we keep going through with these elites. They keep coming up with these plans. They never recognize the facts on the ground. But there's a feeling among these people who are retired military, for the most part, at this think tank, that this is the time to act. We have the Palestinians are kind of on the ropes. The president is pushing for some kind of peace plan. We keep saying that it's coming. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen. So the elites are really pushing for this peace plan. And this, I think, is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. If this is part of the covenant that starts the 70th week, then we are within that time frame. And it's very interesting to watch all of this going on. So Caroline, this is a cover copy of the report that you can find. Caroline has some things to say in her article. Let me just say, here's her conclusion about this report. Last week, we saw this process unfold yet again with the launch of yet another groundbreaking report about the way forward with the Palestinians, produced by Tel Aviv University's Elite Institute for National Security Studies, staffed by retired senior security brass. The INSS report, titled A Political Security Framework for the Israeli-Palestinian Arena, was, we are told, the result of 2 years of work. The INSS's path-breaking report contains no reconsideration of any consistently failed strategic assumptions, which brings us back to Haley and the Trump administration she so ably represented. The INSS experts claim that Israel needs to seize the opportunity that the friendly Trump administration affords us to set a new agenda with the Palestinians. But while this assertion is true enough, the INSS report, like all the reports of security experts that preceded it, does no such thing. Instead, the INSS wise men and women with their vast national security experience tell us that we should use Trump's time in office to convince the friendliest U.S. administration in history to embrace the policies of the most unfriendly U.S. administrations in the history of U.S.-Israel ties. That's referring to the Obama administration. They advocate convincing Trump to embrace the same policies they have advocated, which have failed consistently for a generation. Haley's replacement will likely share her positions on Israel and her criticisms of the UN's institutional anti-Semitism, since her successor will also be representing the Trump administration. But it is hard to imagine her replacement will replicate the extraordinary moral leadership she exercised. And so that's going to be my update for today. I will talk more next week about what it means for the S-300 system to be introduced by Russia into Syria. The reports were that that system is going to be manned by Iranians. It does change the security balance a bit, especially in view of the fact that all the F-35s, the new stealth fighter jet, have been grounded worldwide, including the ones that we've sold to Israel because of a crash that happened in South Carolina last week. They need to figure out what happened. So it's a bit of a game changer. The S-300 system has been around for at least 30 years, maybe 40 years. It's had many, many upgrades. Israel did send a team to Greece a few years ago to look at the S-300 system that they had because they had a more updated version of it. The word is that I've heard is that they were able to tear it apart and figure out how it worked. So I don't know that it's that much of a game changer in terms of the hardware, but in terms of who's manning it, who's bringing it in, who's backing it, Russians bringing it in and training Iranians and Syrians to operate it. In that sense, it is a game changer, and I think it does bear watching in light of Ezekiel 38 and 39. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next week.